Some decisions are simple. Others define a legacy. Mark Zuckerberg is easily one of the wealthiest human beings on the planet. With a fortune topping the $246 billion mark, the natural assumption is that his 3 children are destined to inherit the earth, or at least everything their father built upon it. That is the standard script for dynasties of this magnitude. But this story doesn't follow the standard script. Behind closed doors, Zuckerberg has reportedly solidified a decision that continues to stun insiders. He is not preparing to hand his empire down to his daughters. Not a single billion of it. Instead, Mark is preparing to funnel his life's work toward a very different destination. It isn't a secret family member. It isn't a hidden business partner. To understand how a man builds an empire only to refuse to hand it down, we have to understand how the empire was built in the first place. Join us as we examine the details of the billionaire who left everyone guessing. The origin story. Long before he was a global household name, synonymous with social connection, Mark Elliott Zuckerberg was just a quiet kid in Dobbs Ferry, New York. Born on May 14, 1984, to dentist Dr. Edward Zuckerberg and psychiatrist Karen Kempner, he was raised in a Reformed Jewish household alongside 3 sisters, Ariel, Randy, and Donna. It became clear early on that an immigrant work ethic echoed through the family, stemming from great-grandparents who had arrived from Austria, Germany, and Poland. But Mark's mind worked differently than most kids his age. While his peers were glued to playing video games, he was already consumed by the mechanics of how computers talk to one another. By age 11, he wasn't just using software, he was building it. He created ZuckNet, a basic but functional messaging system connecting the family home to his father's dental office. It wasn't flashy, but it was practical, revealing a crucial early trait. Mark wasn't interested in merely consuming technology. He wanted to control it. His path took him through Ardsley High School and then to Phillips Exeter Academy, where he balanced captaining the fencing team with sharpening his lethal coding skills. During these formative years, he built the Synapse Media Player, an application utilizing early machine learning to understand user listening habits. It caught online attention, earned a decent PC Magazine rating, and landed on Slashed. Even while still in high school, he was taking graduate-level computer courses at Mercy College on Thursday nights just to keep up with his own curiosity. The Harvard disruption. By the time Zuckerberg arrived at Harvard University in 2002, his reputation as a prodigy preceded him. He settled into Kirkland House, joined Alpha Epsilon Pi, and studied psychology and computer science. But academic lectures weren't his primary driver. Code was. In his sophomore year, he built CourseMatch, a clever and ambitious tool helping students choose classes based on the choices of their peers. Then came the infamous FaceMash. Using photos pulled directly from Harvard dorm directories, Mark created a hot or not style site pitting 2 student images against each other for user votes. The idea spread like a virus. Traffic surged so violently that it overwhelmed Harvard's network switches. Within days, the administration shut it down. Students were furious over the unauthorized use of their photos, leading Zuckerberg to issue a public apology while the campus newspaper labeled the entire enterprise as completely improper. For most people, this would have been a severe warning. For Mark, it was proof of concept. It was momentum. In January 2004, he began coding in earnest again. On February 4th, alongside Eduardo Saverin, Andrew McCullum, Dustin Moskovitz, and Chris Hughes, he launched the Facebook. Inspired in part by the printed directories used at prep schools like Exeter, it began as a simple student directory allowing users to list names, photos, and class years. The response was instantaneous, and controversy followed almost immediately. Just 6 days after launch, Harvard seniors Cameron Winklevoss, Tyler Winklevoss, and Divya Narendra accused Zuckerberg of misleading them. They claimed he agreed to build their platform, Harvard Connection, while secretly cannibalizing their ideas to develop a competing product. They took their complaint to the Harvard Crimson, triggering an investigation. The situation exploded. Zuckerberg tried to stop the story. Simultaneously, He used login data pulled from the Facebook to access private emails belonging to the campus editors. The dispute snowballed into a famous lawsuit, eventually ending in a settlement that granted the plaintiffs cash and Facebook shares. The Silicon Valley pivot. By then, the platform was unstoppable, expanding far beyond Harvard's walls to Columbia, NYU, Stanford, Yale, and the Ivy League. What started as a campus experiment was rapidly becoming a national network. That was when Mark made the decision that changed everything. He dropped out of Harvard. The founding team packed up and moved west to Palo Alto, renting a small house that doubled as their first chaotic office. It was cramped, improvised, and powered by little more than caffeine and all-nighters. That summer, Zuckerberg crossed paths with venture capitalist Peter Thiel, who saw the vision and wrote the first major check. By mid-2004, they had a real office. The original plan to return to Harvard evaporated. Zuckerberg later admitted that Silicon Valley felt mythical to him, a place where technology ruled and naked ambition wasn't awkward. He leaned all the way in. Startup culture became his oxygen. He preached to young founders at Y Combinator that youth itself was an advantage, and that being underestimated gave you room to move fast and break things before the incumbents noticed. While the world tried to figure out what this platform was, Facebook kept growing, quietly at first, then explosively. By 2010, Facebook reached 500 million users. It was no longer a college experiment. It was an empire. Journalist Stephen Levy noted that Zuckerberg clearly still thought of himself as a hacker, an identity Zuckerberg embraced openly. Inside Facebook, that mindset became policy. The company hosted all-night hackathons every 6 to 8 weeks, providing engineers with beer, food, and music, challenging them to create something from scratch in a single night. Zuckerberg explained that this energy was core to the company's DNA and his own personality. Recognition followed the massive scale. He landed on MIT Technology Review's Top Innovators list in 2007. Vanity Fair named him the #1 most influential person of the information age in 2010. By 2012, he was meeting global leaders like then-Russian Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev to discuss social media expansion. But growth never came without turbulence. He faced hacking attempts on his personal profile, international backlash over content like the controversial Draw Muhammad contest in Pakistan, and a bizarre lawsuit from Paul Seglia, who fraudulently claimed majority ownership based on falsified contracts, a scheme that landed Seglia with federal charges. Through every scandal, lawsuit, and hack, Zuckerberg kept moving forward. From a boy wiring his parents' house to a CEO rejecting massive buyout offers and surviving legal wars, his trajectory has always been singular. Part 2. The private partnership. The steady presence. For all the lawsuits, congressional hearings, and billion-dollar headlines that dogmark Zuckerberg's public life, there's been one steady, unwavering presence behind the scenes: Priscilla Chan. While the world knows Zuckerberg through viral posts and the social network, very few truly understand the marriage that operates behind closed doors. Even fewer realize just how shaky their love story started. Chan has admitted she almost walked away before it even began. Looking back on their early dating days, she told the Wall Street Journal that meeting Mark felt less like fate and more like a risky experiment. At the time, she was a driven student who had spent her life grinding toward Harvard, only to meet a guy who looked like he was on the verge of getting kicked out. To her, that was a massive red flag. She was careful, measuring every step. But fate intervened in a bathroom line at a Harvard party in 2003. They started talking while waiting. One conversation led to another, and something unexpected began to grow. In a 2010 New Yorker interview, Chan remembered Mark as an awkward, slightly out there nerd carrying beer glasses printed with C++ coding jokes, college humor filtered through computer science. Their relationship unfolded quietly, parallel to Zuckerberg building what would become Facebook. They dated for years before finally deciding to move in together. Chan was deep into her pediatric training at UCSF, while Mark was already planted in Palo Alto, glued to screens and chasing scale. When they moved in, Zuckerberg announced it in typical fashion on Facebook, joking that they now had duplicates of everything and inviting friends to come take appliances before they gave them away. It was awkward, funny, and perfectly on brand. Then came a twist. Roughly 2 years later, just one day after Facebook went public in a massive IPO, guests arrived at Zuckerberg's Palo Alto home, believing they were attending a casual graduation party for Chan's medical degree. Instead, they walked into a wedding. There was no warning, no massive press rollout, just Mark and Priscilla tying the knot in their backyard surrounded by close friends and family. Guests later described it as genuinely cute, the kind of surprise that feels intimate rather than flashy. Since then, they have built a family with 3 children, grown into global philanthropists, and learned to navigate extreme fame together. When asked what keeps their marriage strong, Chan didn't offer fairy tales. She explained that Mark has always pushed her to be braver and believed in her, but she was clear that there is no single magical moment holding them together. What makes it work, she said, is showing up for each other again and again, even when life gets heavy. That grounded honesty matters when your husband runs one of the most powerful tech companies on earth. But grounded honesty isn't the only thing defining their marriage. Mark is known for going over the top when it comes to gifting his wife, and their recent lifestyle choices reflect the unique eccentricities of billionaire life. Recently, the couple made headlines after purchasing a massive $23 million mansion in Washington, D.C., just miles from political power centers. The house spans over 15,000 square feet, basically a private compound disguised as a home. While some see it as a move for meta lobbying, relationship experts suggested long-term couples often look for ways to shake things up to make life feel fresh again. After 20 years, even billionaires hit ruts. Mark Zuckerberg, however, doesn't do romance the usual way. In 2024, he surprised Priscilla with a 7-foot turquoise statue of herself planted right in their garden. He posted it on Instagram with a cheeky caption referencing ancient Roman traditions of sculpting wives. Chan responded playfully, but art critics mocked it as surreal, joking that Zuckerberg was building his own private reality bubble. Then there was 2023, the year Mark installed a full MMA octagon in their backyard while preparing for a highly publicized and eventually canceled cage match challenge with Elon Musk. Priscilla was not amused, having spent 2 years perfecting that lawn. Mark responded by polling his followers on whether he should save the grass or keep the cage. And just when you think you've seen it all, there was Priscilla's 40th birthday. Zuckerberg showed up wearing a glittery jumpsuit inspired by Benson Boone and attempted a dramatic piano jump. It was awkward, cringe-worthy, unfiltered, but strangely sincere. For a couple whose marriage began one day after the Facebook IPO, mixing extreme business pressure with personal life has always been normal. Their move to D.C. may offer political proximity, but experts believe it also promises breathing room from the nonstop grind at Meta's California headquarters. Becoming a Washington power couple feels like a natural evolution for 2 people operating on a global stage. Their coordinated appearances and curated social media moments suggest they have embraced visibility as a team. While most couples don't have huge estates or backyard fight cages to spice things up, the Zuckerbergs clearly use their vast resources to keep their partnership alive. Behind the empire, the power plays, and the inheritance decisions, there's a woman who saw Mark before the billions and stayed not because he was perfect, but because they chose each other repeatedly while the whole world watched. Part 3. The Metaverse Gamble and the Inheritance Paradox. To understand the future Zuckerberg is planning for his family, you have to rewind to when he bet everything on a new vision. By 2021, the pressure around Facebook had reached a boiling point. Scandals were stacking up, public trust was collapsing due to leaked internal documents, and regulators were circling. So Zuckerberg did something bold. Some called it desperate. He killed Facebook as a corporate identity. The company officially rebranded itself as Meta. While the apps, Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, stayed the same, the parent company changed its name, logo, and entire narrative. Zuckerberg explained that Meta, from the Greek word meaning beyond, was meant to encompass future platforms like virtual and augmented reality. He argued the old brand couldn't carry what they were trying to become. Behind the scenes, the timing wasn't subtle. The rebrand landed right after whistleblower Frances Haugen leaked damning documents accusing the company of prioritizing profit over safety, harming teenage mental health, and failing to control hate speech globally. Zuckerberg pushed back, calling it a false narrative, but the damage was done. And so, Meta was born. Standing on a virtual stage, Zuckerberg unveiled the metaverse, an immersive online universe where people wouldn't just scroll, but live, work, and play inside digital spaces powered by VR headsets. At headquarters, the famous thumbs-up sign was replaced by a glowing blue infinity symbol. Zuckerberg made it clear, eventually, Facebook the product would become optional. Reality, however, would not. He wanted Meta to be seen as a metaverse company first. To outsiders, it sounded like upgraded VR. To Zuckerberg, it was the future of human interaction. Offices without walls and hangouts without geography. It was from this virtual oasis that things started getting strange. In 2024, satirical reports painted an unsettling picture of just how deep Zuckerberg's VR obsession had gone. According to these humorous takes, Priscilla Chan grew suspicious after noticing him spending 14 hours a day inside his headset, reportedly looking confused when taking it off and asking if she was his computer spouse or his flesh spouse. While satirical, the stories highlighted a real public perception that the billionaire CEO was openly trying to move humanity into a virtual dimension while his real-world company burned through controversy. Meta wasn't just a rebrand. It was an escape hatch intended to pivot public attention away from whistleblowers and Tor holograms. Zuckerberg wasn't just renaming his company. He was betting the entire future on a world that didn't exist yet. Which brings us back to the very real world and the question of who inherits the results of that massive gamble. When people hear Mark Zuckerberg is worth over $200 billion, they assume his 3 children will inherit it all. That's how these stories usually go. But Zuckerberg's story doesn't follow that script. Despite nearly all his fortune being tied to his ownership of Meta stock, he and Priscilla have made a decision that flips expectations upside down. They plan to give away 99% of their Meta shares, not after they die, but during their lifetimes. To understand why, you have to look at the family. Mark and Priscilla are parents to 3 daughters. Maxima, Max, born in late 2015 after heartbreaking miscarriages. August, born in 2017, and Aurelia, born in March 2023. Each birth marked a philosophical shift in Zuckerberg's life. Before Max arrived, Zuckerberg announced he would take 2 months of paternity leave, a move rooted in family, not optics. When she was born, they launched the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, CZI. In an open letter to their newborn daughter that stunned the world, they promised to give away 99% of their shares to advance human potential and promote equality. They told Max they felt a responsibility to leave the world better than they found it. Quietly, they made it clear this money was never destined for a trust fund. Fatherhood changed him, shifting his perspective entirely. Despite their wealth, Mark and Priscilla work hard to keep their children grounded, giving them chores and teaching them about effort rather than entitlement. So, if the children aren't inheriting the billions, who is? The uncomfortable answer is no single person. The Chan Zuckerberg Initiative is not a traditional nonprofit. It is structured as a limited liability company, LLC. This means it can invest, lobby for political policy, and fund projects directly, with returns funneled back into their mission. At the time of the announcement, the shares were worth $45 billion. Today, that value is vastly higher. Yet the plan remains unchanged. Their daughters will not grow up with vaults of inherited Meta stock waiting for them. Zuckerberg is positioning his wealth to flow into systems, platforms, research, and institutions that will outlive him. It is a move that feels less like traditional charity and more like grand strategy. Because while his children won't control Meta's billions personally, Zuckerberg established a structure where he still decides where that money goes and what kind of world it builds. This isn't just about generosity, it is about control at scale. Mark Zuckerberg isn't creating simple heirs. He is trying to create global outcomes. When you zoom out, it tells you everything about how he sees the future, not as something his children will merely own, but as something he intends to design. His fortune is being redirected away from bloodlines and toward a vision that stretches far beyond one family. And that might be the most powerful and controversial inheritance of all. What do you think about Zuckerberg's decision not to leave his fortune to his children? Do you think they will grow up to resent it or understand why he made this choice? Share your thoughts in the comments below.